All right. So it is 6:05 p.m. So we're going to get started here. We want to first of all thank you for attending this call. As many of you know me, I'm Emmanuel Briggs, the Director of Community Affairs in our Office of Marketing and Communications. Again, this call, as you all know, is to talk about the sinkhole um, that was identified beginning last week at our site out in Great Falls. We certainly understand there has been lots of concerns. We've been working in tandem with Fairfax County elected officials for messaging, getting information out there. So we've been doing lots of emails and calls and bottled water deliveries and sampling of water. All of those activities have culminated in some great news that we've been able to share right before the meeting, and that is we are able to lift the do not drink water advisory. So very great news. But we also understand that there are still some concerns regarding how we got to this place in the first place, and so that's what we're here to talk about this evening. Just a few Robert's rules, and then we'll jump right in. The meeting is being recorded, and we will be able to make that recording available post the meeting. If you do have questions, and we know there are questions, if you can please hold those or place them in chat. We promise to get to as many of them as possible, if not all of them. We do have this meeting blocked for 2 hours, understanding that there are going to be a number of questions and concerns. And so with that said, I'm going to jump right in and let Bob take it away.
Thank you, Emmanuel. You want to push us? Who's driving? Tijuana? Thank you.
Yep, Tijuana.
So we're going to first give you an overview of where we are in terms of how we got to where we were in kind of a chronological order of events of what's happening. We're then going to talk about some of the hydrogeological information of the area, the testing and the test results, and then go through a little more where we're ongoing community outreach and the next steps of where we're going. Tijuana, fine. I think everybody knows where we are, but just as a quick background, I know the river's dirty in this picture, but so to orient ourselves, coming from the left-hand side on the Virginia side of the river is a 66-inch line from Loudon and Fairfax. Coming across the river from WSSC is a 54-inch, and then emanating from that spot southward is a 78-inch that quickly transitions into a tunnel. The site is pretty much highlighted here inside of the red box on the screen. Next slide, please. So what were we doing? Again, this is everybody we've been with you guys for a bunch of years to go through where we are. So some of you all seen this a bunch of times, some may not have. The 66 coming down from Loudon is up on the left-hand side. Coming in from about 2:30, 3 o'clock, or a little 2 3 o'clock is the 54-inch from Maryland, and exiting out at the bottom was the 78-inch. A bunch of investigations, internal investigations performed by DC Water had indicated that the pipe was deteriorating, and the intent was to come in and replace it. We'd come up with, working between the contractor, their design build team, DC Water's team, come up with an option to do this in a dry. If people remember, the next manhole downstream is over a mile downstream. So bypass pumping is not something that could be achieved during the work. So the idea was to build a box on the top, manhole, we're calling that manhole 31.5. and divert over to the circular area in the middle over top of the 54, and then lastly convert that back into the 78-inch pipe just before it goes into the tunnel and heads on from that spot. We've been at it for a little, year and a half, I guess, somewhere in that range in the work, and pretty far along with about 6 months to go. So, Tijuana, next slide. So the sinkhole, what happened? Monday morning last week, a sinkhole was discovered. It was this big. In the foreground, you can see the excavation. You can see kind of like the wood ribs around in a circle. And then you see the orange fence, and just to the bottom right-hand corner is the manhole 35 that, you know, this title of this job is kind of around. And that's the first sinkhole that occurred. And so when that first happened, and we got alerted by the folks on site, and DC Water's team and everybody got together, one of the first things completed was to follow the emergency response plan. And DC Water had, you know, developed with the design build team over a couple years a robust emergency response plan to be used anytime there was an emergency on the site. Can you jump to the next slide, T? And one of the cornerstones of that emergency response plan was to have retained a bypass pumping contractor. For those in the engineering world, if you had a emergency tomorrow and you just called up and said, I need an emergency bypass pump, that's probably not happening. But what DC Water had done was to put them on retainer and actually paid them on a monthly basis to have them available, such that in a failure. So one of the first things and one of the emergency things that happened right off the bat was to get the emergency bypass contractor on board and out at the site, and they immediately were getting engaged. So now I'm going to pass it over to Al. I think the next slide's passing over to Al, if I'm correct. Al's the from Ullman Schutte is directing the work on the site.
Good evening, everyone. So as Bob noted, on Monday, our crews first noticed this sinkhole, which immediately put us into an emergency situation. It was not located over an area where we're actively working, but we identified that this is a very risky situation, and we immediately began working around the clock with a focus on securing this situation while protecting our neighbors, the environment, and our people completing this work. We've been working around the clock since that time. So as you can see from this overview, the first thing we did was use a drone to try to look into that sinkhole. And so this map shows the general location of that first observed sinkhole. T, if we go to the next photo, I think we can actually start to see inside the sinkhole. So this, the pipe, the Loudon pipe that Bob described, is approximately 35 feet in the ground. So this is a very deep sinkhole and a very risky situation. In this photo, we were able to see that the water itself was still flowing through. We began to assess that the top of this pipe in this portion had collapsed, which was intended, it will be replaced over the course of this project. So this was the situation we were trying to prevent, and that's the point of this project. So at this point, the water was flowing still through the conveyance, and so we were able to identify this current situation. We have some lines cutting through the page. Those are actually tiebacks, which are structural stability for that excavation that Bob had noted, the kind of boards. So this was our situation through Monday and Tuesday. T, let's roll to the next slide. This can kind of give you a spatial indication of the approximate size of the area that we were dealing with. At this point, we had a much smaller area of impact, and there's an orange fence you can see that is encircling the area to keep people away from that location. Again, we were using drones to try to identify what was happening. See if we can roll to the next one. On Tuesday night, so that situation remained fairly stable Monday into Tuesday. And on Tuesday, we started to see a little more degradation. On the night of Tuesday, the 13th, we did get a lot of rain in the region overnight, and the flows within this pipe increase overnight. Our actual high flow period is approximately 8 till midnight, and then it starts to slow down. So during that period, we started to see much more degradation, a very unstable excavation, and scour essentially of that water, removing the subgrade, removing soil, and collapsing soils, which is a very unsafe situation and unstable excavation. by Wednesday, there had been continual areas of collapse and some more failure. We started to see some water trickle into our excavation, but we were able to remove some obstructions on Wednesday. We were able to install some what we call trench boxes, which are for slope stability into that water area. You can kind of see in the picture just how big that area had grown to. So we had attempted to reach a stable situation on Wednesday. Overnight, Wednesday night, which is, we can scroll to the next
Cal,
slide.
can I make one comment on here, Al, real quick?
Sure, absolutely.
So folks, all that dirt washed into the pipe. Okay, it did not leave the site. All of the what you see from the erosion that happened here, that the flow coming down essentially washed all of that in the pipe, and it was carried downstream to DC Water's treatment facility. So at this point, in this juncture, in this time frame, nothing has left the site. It's all been contained inside of here.
Absolutely, Bob. So overnight, Wednesday night into Thursday is when we saw the continuing degradation of soil loss. We think that was coupled with continual more collapse of that actual pipe, which allowed the exposed area to lengthen, which is we think why I'm going to say the collapsed area is extending further to the left on this picture. And so that continual collapse just exposed more area for soil degradation. Overnight, Wednesday into Thursday, is when we lost the soil that was actually against our excavation. So you can see the back of our wooden boards kind of in the very middle of this photo. At that point, when that soil eroded away, water was able to directly enter into that excavation. And so that's when we collected water within our actual work area. At this point, it's still all contained. I'll show you where it was going in a moment. But that situation developed on about Thursday morning or early on Thursday. See if we can go to the next photo. We've got two photos to demonstrate where this water has gone. To the left photo is a couple months ago from our active construction area. So we were excavating in rock and soils to install the replacement 78-inch pipe. So that was the shape of this excavation, very much in alignment with what the drawing that Bob had noted previously. On the right photo, this is what we had on Thursday. The water had entered through the wooden portion that we'd seen in the prior photo and begun and filled that excavation area. So if we can roll to the next photo, Tijuana.
So one quick one at this point. So at that point in time frame, it had gotten gotten quite a bit less controlled. It had made it onto the bedrock at that point in time frame. And that is when the DC Water team started to develop the communication to get out, okay, out to the public. That is the point in time frame. Prior to that, it was in a contained situation in a trench, and we knew what we were doing, and it was pretty much hanging on. But once it had moved past that into the rock, that's the point in time frame when DC Water was kind of, it started to enact its getting out and more conversation external.
Absolutely, Bob. So as part of our construction, we are extending a new structure around the existing sewer pipe. In order to do that, we installed a steel pipe, the cylinder you can see in this photo, and extended it into the existing tunnel portion that I think the residents are familiar with. There's a space around this steel pipe between that and the tunnel. We call it an annular space. It is kind of the dark crescent on top of the steel cylinder where it penetrates into the wall. So that opening has provided the relief for the water that is collected within our excavation. It is entering through that space back into the actual tunnel where it is continuing down the stream to be treated as per normal or per plan. So that situation has remained in place since about Thursday. Since then, the slope stability that I noted back in the collapsed area, we've had a much more stable situation, which has been to the benefit of the response. So that is where how the water is getting into our supportive excavation area and leaving. And as Bob noted, that area is where we, as a team, developed concerns and wanted to share those with you. See if we can roll.
Pardon my graphics. At one point in time frame, that white arrow pointed towards the annular space. I don't know what happened.
So that was our situation developing on the water. I will step you through our response so you understand what we've been working on. This photo is the upstream manhole we referred to as 31.5. It is over the Loudon line. You kind of see the odd shaped box in the middle of the photo. You can actually see the 66-inch pipe traveling through that box. That is the Loudon line. This is at a higher elevation just upstream. That pipe is the portion that collapsed as it went down the hill and connected to that existing manhole 31. So in this location, the pipe is stable. So that area provides an area for us to install pumps. As you can see, we have 6 total pumps. That is the response plan. That is a significant pumping capacity. Those are 24-inch suctions and 18-inch discharges. So very large pumping system to be able to handle the flows that are conveyed within that piping. We have been working to get this entire pumping system installed since Monday. It's the day we recognized it, we initiated the response, and it is obviously a very significant response to get this type of system installed. The water is currently being and will continue to be discharged into the existing manhole 31. We have tapped all those discharge pipes into the top of that manhole such that the flow would then be conveyed down to the treatment facility. So that's the intent of the bypass. We can remove the water upstream and pump it back into the system downstream so that the area of the collapse can be isolated.
So one of the, if you remember earlier, I commented on the emergency response plan. One of the things that was done as part of that was to design this box specifically such that these pumps could be put into it in the event of an emergency. So Al and their design team spent a bunch of time to figure out how to get these pumps in, get it organized, and have the ability to be able to put the bypass pumps in.
Yes, and the discharge end of the pipes, that is where more of the challenges have occurred. This is a slightly confusing photo, I acknowledge, but it's obviously a challenging situation. The pipes kind of zigzag across the site or across the photo. Those are the discharge pipes of these pumps. We have to route them around the upper slope. And then we've actually built a steel bridge out to the top of manhole 31. We removed the lid of 31, and these pipes are being discharged down into the cylinder of that manhole. We've had to install 5 of these black discharge pipes and stack them all within that manhole. That's been a process. So as each one was completed, we had developed one more pump system of capacity. We're targeting a total of 5 active pumps. So as of the 18th, 3 pumps had been completely installed on piping and tied into this manhole. We were able to actually start a small cut in the pipe to induce some water into that box so that we could start running these pumps and developing a run history with these pumping systems. Because when we remove that pipe at that box we just looked at, we are very much active pumping system at that point. We're relying on the system. We have completed a 4th pump over the weekend, which gets us to about as far as we can go at this point. The 5th pump has to be installed, finished after the pipe is removed. So we've gotten where we have 4 pumps in place and have been operating to develop an operational strategy and confidence in their run sequence. If we can go to the next slide, Tijuana. This is now what the area looks like at the pump suction. We have installed, it's hard to count, but there are 4 of the suction pumps included. We are continuing to allow more water to leak into this box to allow these pumps to slowly come up to speed. and slowly start to remove the water from the system, and ultimately transitioning to where this is an on-site pumping station is what it is becoming. That is a slow process to allow the pressure to slowly relieve into this box. We're actively now working to continue to switch over to the full bypass capacity. It's a very slow process. We'll be continuing that overnight. And then I think the fifth pump should come on in to be positioned and ready to be added to the fleet once that conversion happens. We're anticipating that fifth pump being in place by end of day tomorrow. That would get our full bypassing system into service, which would alleviate the water flowing that we'd kind of had seen in some of those photos that are flowing through that excavation. We then move into the next phases of remediating that area and providing more stability and assuring a safe operation for all involved. Bob, I could talk for days, but I'm sure people want to hear more stuff, so I'll hand back off to you guys.
It's heading over to another Bob. Bob O'Neill's going to talk about the one of the things DC Water was engage a hydrogeologist expert, and he's going to present right now. Bob, I think you're on mute.
Got my camera on, but not my mic. Good evening. My name is Bob O'Neill. I'm with Brown and Caldwell. I'm a hydrogeologist. I've been working with Brown and Caldwell in that type of capacity for about 35 years. Obviously, once this situation occurred, one of the most important things to try to get our arms around is which way is groundwater flowing, and did this affect the direction of groundwater flow, and where's it going to? So, just first off, one of the first things we looked at was topography, because topography really controls groundwater flow to a large extent. You know, I'll just walk through these slides fairly quickly to give you a basis for that initial step. And then as we were going through this rapid evaluation, we did identify data to help substantiate our findings from the topographic analysis. But so really, this is a block diagram from a document that the U.S. Geological Survey has put out, just generalities about groundwater flow. And it shows a ground surface here, topographic surface with creeks coming through in the low spots of the topography and higher areas here. And the point of this slide is that the water table, the groundwater elevations tend to mimic the topography. They're kind of a subdued image of the topography. So areas where you have higher elevations, the groundwater elevation is higher, and then as you move down to lower areas, it's lower. And you can basically almost use topographic contours to give you a good idea of which way groundwater is flowing. So we've got this diagram here, which the blue area is where it's saturated with groundwater. And if you pull off this ground surface, you can see this is the surface of the water table, or the groundwater elevation surface. And groundwater flows basically downhill. If you drew contours on this, these flow lines would be perpendicular to those contours, and they discharge down into lower areas like creeks and streams and things like that. So this is the technical basis for our initial analysis. And as I'll show you, we developed some data to support that. Next slide, please. So this is a topographic map of the area. This is the area where the pipe breakage occurred. This is the Potomac River here up to the northeast. And you can see here's our topographic contours. We're at around 170 before you get to the river. As you get closer to the site, you're a little higher. And then quickly the contours build up. You can see we go from 180 to 200. Get up to 280, even up to 290. So this is a big hill area. And just based on this, just an initial evaluation of topography, the expectation is that groundwater would flow in this direction. So here's our site, and it's a very short distance to the river, maybe 300 feet. It would be heading towards that area, and that this area is basically surrounded by higher elevation groundwater. We right after this, we got available to us well completion records for residential wells that were have been installed and they're used in this area. And if you could go to the next slide, please. So we looked at the well completion records, and one of the things that this is information that the driller puts down on a well completion report after they're done drilling a well, and it tells you, well depth, how deep's the casing, things like that. And one of the pieces of information they ask for is what's called a static water level in the well. So after they're done drilling, they let the water equilibrate in that well, right? So it gets to a certain point and it stops and it stabilizes. And so that's our static water elevation. So they report that in the well completion report. And that's basically a depth. If you took the measuring tape, you went from the ground surface down to there, that's a distance to the top of the water table or the top of the groundwater surface, right, under non-pumping conditions. And so we took the ground surface elevation and subtracted that depth to water, and that gives us a groundwater elevation at those points. So this is the data from that for the wells that it was available. These ones that say NA, they did not have the static water level listed in the well completion report. And again, this star is the site. You have some monitoring wells at the site where the groundwater elevation prior to the incident was at about 160 feet. And you can see these elevations are much higher than the elevation at the site. And that supports that the groundwater is flowing towards the river. You can see these two areas here. It's high. The groundwater elevations are higher here than on either side. Two things to keep in mind with that. These data were collected at different times. They were collected right after each of the wells was drilled, and that was over the span of a few years. And that these two wells that have somewhat lower groundwater elevations are closer to topographical lows. So it kind of follows that the high topography has the higher groundwater elevations, the lower ones have the lower groundwater elevations, and you can pretty much, this can substantiates relying on topography for a general prediction of groundwater flow direction. So that's really where we're working at it on here. The groundwater elevations down in this area based on topography and based on this data here are much higher than at the site. So groundwater wants to flow in this northeasterly direction. Another good piece of information that was available to us in those well records was something that's called a sustained yield test. So what that is you have your static water level, as I mentioned. That's the water level in the well when it's been stable, it's stable, and nobody's been pumping from it. And then you run your well pump at a set rate. So you say 5 gallons per minute, and I'll keep it at there, and I'll watch. And as you do that, the water level in your well drops down, and at a certain point, it stabilizes. And you keep the pump running for a while to make sure it's stable. So after a time, I can say, wow, the water level dropped this much, and I'm pumping at this much rate, and I can use that to calculate a permeability of the rock. So the faster, if I'm pumping at a certain rate, the faster that water level drops, the lower the permeability of the rock. If I have something that's very porous and permeable, it's going to be harder and harder to bring that water level down. Well, the two locations, if you could go to the next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Jumping back one. I missed a point here, and forgive me. Well, actually, let me finish my point, and I'll jump back to this slide if I could. There we go. So the two locations we had that specific capacity data were these two locations here, and based on that pumping rate, we calculated a permeability, or what's called a hydraulic conductivity for the rock. So basically, not to get into a lot of detail, but this is how easy or hard it is for groundwater to flow through rock, right, through the rock at this point. And these numbers, just to put it in perspective, if you were building a landfill and you wanted to put a low permeability liner underneath it, these would be tremendous numbers for that. They usually, you want to get to 1 × 10⁻⁶ or lower. So the minus, that exponent you're seeing there, the larger that minus number is the lower the permeability. So these are very low numbers. So what that's saying is the wells that are pumping in those areas have trouble drawing in water from very far away. They're pulling in water from just directly around the well casing. So there's a low likelihood for the groundwater to be pulled in from far away. So that's part of that evaluation. And if I could go back to the point I missed, and I apologize for this, if I go back to the other slide. Actually, can you go back 2 slides? Yeah. So this is the slide I showed you before. This groundwater elevation was from before the release. We're seeing the groundwater flow direction go here. And now if we go to the next slide, this shows the estimate of the highest the groundwater elevation would have gotten to as a result of that release. So you have some upwelling around the pipe. It adds water, outside the pipe to the groundwater system. It causes sort of a mounding in the area of the groundwater table, but it only went, the best estimate was it went up about 5 feet. So what that's saying is that event didn't really change the overall flow direction. So groundwater continued to flow towards the northeast. It didn't get high enough where it would have caused a flow reversal. And now that that water level is being drawn down back again, and it should return back to normal conditions. So really the takeaway is groundwater flows towards the northeast, and even during the incident, the event, the release did the same thing, and that the residential wells out here don't draw water from very far away from themselves. Because when they operate, the water level drops down so quickly, that indicates that they're pulling water in from very close, and it doesn't pull in water from far away. So that's a summary of what we evaluated. And I'll hand it off to on that.
To Maureen.
Maureen.
Hey, Maureen.
Hi, yeah. So I'm the director for water quality technology for DC Water. So just want to talk about the sampling a little bit. Back in 2 years ago, before we started construction, back in 2022, we had collected samples from 6 of the properties around the area based on that topography. Looking at that, and then around the area, we had these 6 homes that we collected before this construction, just to get an idea where we were with coliform and E. coli. E. coli is a subset of coliform that's indicative of if you had of sewage. Basically, we use so if we were to find E. coli, that would be an indicator that you have a sewage contaminant. Then, so following this, when we realized we had, a potential for the sewage to get into the groundwater table, very concerned, obviously. So we contacted you all and collected samples on Saturday, the 17th, and also 19th. And I believe we were out again today collecting samples. And so from the properties, they all came back negative for coliform and E. coli. We did have one home where we collected from an outside hose bib, and that home was positive, had positive for coliform, negative for E. coli, but that had happened both before when we collected in 2022 and then after here. So basically the results were very consistent between before construction and now. So Fairfax County, and I just want to reiterate that Fairfax County Health did what we call lift the advisory about the do not use, and now they're saying it's okay to use your water normally based on this excellent data that Bob provided us on the hydrogeological data, our water sampling, and the progression we've made with mitigating the contamination at the site. So just wanted to make sure everyone's clear on that you can now use your water normally. In Fairfax County Health, they're also on this call they'll be available for later questions too. All right, next slide. So just want to note, we'll continue sampling. We're going to continue sampling daily. We do, as we've contacted with you, I'm sure Tijuana and Emmanuel have been in contact with you. We're doing daily sampling right around between 8 and 9:30. If additional residents, which I'm sure on this call, nearby residents, the request sampling, please contact Emmanuel. If you're concerned that something has happened with your well, please contact Emmanuel Briggs. And also if you need to reschedule or something, we will continue the sampling. Once we contain the site, once we contain this and get the water pump down, then we'll just continue for another week or so, just to make sure everything is good with the water. And with that, on to outreach.
As many of you know, we've been doing lots of outreach, and you've seen enough text on the slide. So I want to spare you another slide with words. But as many of you know, and to reiterate what all of us have been saying throughout this entire presentation thus far, we take these things very seriously. So, as was mentioned, we have been working diligently with Fairfax County elected officials. We've been having internal meetings, I can tell you personally, day and night. Friday till almost midnight, Saturday, Tijuana and I were kind of walking the beat throughout the neighborhood, and bottled water were being delivered and water is being sampled, more meetings on Sunday and more discussions today. So we do take this very seriously in all of the outreach that we have been doing. Also just doing lots of calls to customers, again, knocking on doors with customers. On the slides coming up, you'll see my email address. You can also email me if you have any concerns or you want sampling to happen at your property. But again, all the information we've been providing to you could not have been possible without, one, the coordination internally, two, the coordination with Fairfax County, but first and foremost, and most importantly, coordination with you, the community. We certainly, care about you. We certainly want you to know that, we are your community partner in the district, and we have infrastructure out there. So we certainly want to make sure, your services are optimal and up to par. So, yep.
New car.
Thank you for that presentation. This is Jimmy Bierman, the supervisor in the Drainsville district. I'm going to speak on behalf of all the residents for a second here. And I apologize for shooting the messenger, but a messenger is about to get shot. You should not have not contacted or told the county what was going on until Friday at 6:21 p.m. Shouldn't have happened. We all sat here on this call, and for at least the first 20 minutes, we were hearing about emergency steps or potential unsafe stuff or continual areas of collapse that were all happening between Monday and Friday when you did not include the county. Do not ever do that again. Just don't do it again. Include the county so that we can get out to our residents. Now that I'm done with that throat clearing, I want to say that thank you for putting together this presentation and for showing, I believe, I hope, and I'm going to knock on wood and knock on all the wood around me here as I say this, why it looks like at the moment we are okay, and why, I also want to thank you for what you have been doing the last 96 hours to keep the community engaged and make sure that people, were getting the testing that they wanted and that they needed, that we were doing testing of the water, that we were making sure that there was no problems there. I will say, like I told you on a call yesterday, that anybody in this area that wants testing should get testing. I understand, and frankly, I would urge the people in the neighborhood to think very much about those slides we just saw with the elevation changes and all of the information about well water. But I will say anybody in the neighborhood who gets testing should get testing. Thank you for also the workers I know have been working around the clock to try and stop this and the pumps and everything. I'm sure that there are a lot of very tired people out there, and I want to thank them for the work that they're doing. I just want to be clear that if anything like this ever happens again, please let us know much sooner than you did this time. But thank you for the work that you've done. And with that, I will obviously leave it up to the residents to ask their questions. I just had to get that out there because it bothered me, and I'm sure it bothers some people on this call. But I will also urge the residents to think about what we just saw, and hopefully, fingers crossed, knocking on lots of wood, we're going to be okay. Thanks.
Understood, Mr. Pearman, and I will apologize on behalf of DC Water. I will definitely say that we have been getting some requests outside of the original 6 properties. We have gotten some requests, and so as we get those, I do filter those to the group, and we do add that to the schedule for the daily sampling.
Thank you. I think there's some questions in the chat.
Yep.
All right, all good.
All right. Awesome. And before we go to the Q&A, are there any other Fairfax County elected officials that would like to say anything before we jump into the Q&A? Okay. Well, we will then jump into...
Ready.
Okay, so we'll jump into the questions. We've got a few. Just feel free to keep sending them in. Again, we've got this meeting until 8 o'clock tonight. So I have, when it was decided to notify households, can you explain what the plan is and how it rolled out? How do you decide who to notify? Most of us on this call found out through neighbors. Will, who would you like to speak to that to kind of reiterate some of the points we made during the presentation?
Bob, do you want to start and then I can fill in?
Certainly. For those of us who've been, you residents we've been dealing with this for multiple years. When we started this project back several years ago, one of the first things that we did was, as Maureen mentioned in her slides, we had a sampling plan for a number of homes that we were going to sample in advance of the work being started. So we rotated once we saw that and said there's a potential, in an overabundance of caution in advance. We looked up and said, well, that's the first group we're going to get to, and we're going to work towards the sampling. And that's where the communication started. And that's how that decision was made, was based on the prior group prior to construction in terms of where the testing was going to go. Will, do you want to expand?
Yeah, Tijuana, can you go to, I think it's slide 11? And while she's getting there, my name is William Ellett. I'm the Director of Engineering at DC Water. I'm responsible for the planning, design, and construction for all of our pipeline projects. So the question is to when. This slide really defines it. Once, and then if you can click to the next one, I believe shows the wastewater inside the excavation. This moment on Thursday morning, and then seeing that wastewater there, that's really what defined the risk, a potential risk, right? We were acting out of an abundance of caution, as we've seen with the test results. There were no positive test results for E. coli. The risk really came about when this event that you see here on the right happened in that way, where we have the wastewater sitting on top of that fractured bedrock. So that was the moment where we started rolling out that notification. And then looking back through the chat, and then Tijuana, if you can go to the slide that shows the red boxes around the properties, like 22 maybe. Yeah, there we go. So basically what this is as our as Bob, our hydrogeologist, was describing, all of the groundwater is generally flowing in the direction of the work site anyway. So it's basically a series of concentric circles around the work site as to who was identified for the original testing. And a couple years back, before the start of construction, those homes were also selected for that baseline testing in coordination with DEQ.
All right. Thank you, Will.
So this is Peggy. I'm the box closest to you, 103 River Park, and we were notified. I agree with the county official. We can see your site from our house, and we knew something bad was happening because on the 13th, you guys started working all night, and usually you notify us if you're going to do night work. So I'll tell you, we were pretty nervous because either you guys were way behind schedule or something bad was happening. So I think it would have been appropriate to probably notify the locals about what was going on, at least in the county. Thanks to county for coming out on Saturday morning, by the way. That was some impressive response when I know you guys weren't scheduled for doing that. I have a lot of questions. I don't know if you want to walk through the chats on these, but my main question is, how much fluid do you think actually went out of your contained system?
So we're working on that. Given the transmissivity that Bob, our hydrogeologist, was looking at, it's going to be a relatively small volume, but we're still we need to work on that a little bit. And the other thing that still needs to happen is we need to get those bypass pumps running so that we can get that water drawn down in that area.
So is any fluid going into the water table right now, or is it all contained?
Bob, I'm going to have to, I don't know if you're able to answer that question. Bob O'Neill.
Based on the data here, I can't say it's all that went out is contained with the pumping down of the system. Anything that did go out is going to head back towards the dewatering area. But as far as, the direction of flow, based on the characteristics of the bedrock that I was describing, it would tend to want to flow again, not towards your home, but towards in the direction of the river, actually.
But remember when Bob did his presentation earlier, Peggy, one of the things he was noting that the influence is very low, okay, in terms of the area it's able to move. Once the sewage had hit the open, I'm going to call it open excavation, not flowing down the channel. One of the discussions we had with our geotechnical engineers was, could we prevent this from migrating? And the geotechnical engineer at the time basically said that the rock out there is so tight, we'd have to put in borings all over the place to try to push it, which essentially is a good thing in this situation, which means that it does not permeate out very easily from where we are. And if you remember correctly on Al's slides, when he was talking about the east end of the excavation, there was that big annular space over top of that 72-inch steel pipe. It was essentially flowing in and over and out and back into the sewer, which is a great thing. So it was finding its path in and around and out.
So once I just want to get my head around how much is gone into the water table, because I know once something's in the water table, it's really hard to figure out where it goes within the water table, and it could live in there for thousands of years, right? That's what the health officials said, and the research that I've done. So I just want to, are you guys going to stand up and give a guarantee to Wade, who's, the little open slot between manhole 31 and our property, that his groundwater's intact and he can sell that property without an impact to his property value?
What we can't, I mean, what we're going to do is we're already looking into that volume that might have migrated through the into that fractured bedrock in the region of the excavation. We'll be sharing all that information with the county, and with that we'll be sharing the results of that report.
So basically you don't know. I listened to Bob, hydrologist, but I know our neighbor's well's at 90 feet. I know our well was at 300 feet. I mean, I just can't rely on somebody looking at the topography and figuring out that we're not going to be impacted. I just have no comfort in basically, somebody looking at the lay of the land and thinking that it's all just going to go in the river. So I just need more specificity around that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's why we're happy to continue testing. Is as Maureen described, E. coli. It will continue to test for that. That would be the indicator that there's been any seepage into the groundwater that your well is pulling from.
Yeah, and I'd just like to know the time frame when you guys think it'll be fully contained. If I understand the bypassing scenario, does that mean it's 100% sort of captured by the 5 pumps or 4.5 pumps, or it is currently 0 seepage into the well water? Is that what you're saying? Groundwater?
I'll pass it to Al on the timeline. It is important to note that one of the wells that we're testing water from is actually right down on the site, and that one is tested negative for everything as well. So that one's significantly closer. I mean, it's right there on site. But Al, as far as the,
right? I mean, the water goes somewhere. The water goes wherever it wants to go. So I just don't think that you can sort of say that it's not going to be an impact further downstream until you have more data.
Understood.
Will, I'll speak to our current situation. So we are not currently fully bypassing all of the flow. We are bringing the 4th pump online, or 4th pump is online, but we're slowly starting to remove the pipe to allow the water to enter that pumping area because it is pressurized there. So that is a slow process. We have not fully converted that full pumping capacity yet. Once we're able to do that, we will then be able to remove the water from that excavated area. So where we saw our excavator underwater, that area we would be able to remove once we're able to push all the water into that existing manhole and into the sewer where it's supposed to be. So we'll complete the bypass and make it active, fully active, and then remove the water that's on the site. And at that point, I think we'll all feel a lot better about our current situation. There will be some challenges for us. It is a system that's continues to have some challenges of how to address it, but that is our focus: the bypass in place, and then dewater the site so there's no more standing water there at the location.
So Al, are you pretty comfortable that another sinkhole won't occur around that area, or are you just going to be totally bypassed so it won't really matter?
We're going to go into that bypass mode. Having seen the pipe, as I mentioned, the collapsed area kept expanding. I don't have a lot of confidence in that pipe. We anticipate this bypass being in place until the entire new infrastructure is commissioned. And we're looking at ways with DC Water to expedite the completion of the construction so that, again, this permanent infrastructure that we're building completely bypasses this area. And so the intent of this project was to eliminate these type of risks. But yeah, that's our focus. That sinkhole is, we don't want to rely on anything in that area.
Do you think the pipe was leaking before the sinkhole? Is that why we have a sinkhole?
I think there was an immediate collapse maybe over the weekend of the prior, that scour, as I mentioned, when we get high flow at night, I think that area is submerged. So as the top of that pipe collapsed or eroded, it started hitting soil, and that scour on the soil, it has been what has really expedited or this situation, the instability and the collapsing. When it surcharges at night, it scours it. And so I think it was in my opinion, It was probably a fairly immediate incident that led up to that sinkhole that we identified on that Monday. And then obviously conditions continued to change rapidly over the next several days. I think that's indicative of what was happening right before we identified that sinkhole.
Thanks.
And just one other quick comment. I understand the concern around the safety of the drinking water. Speaking for the DC Water team, I know we all share the same concern. I know our counterparts with Fairfax County and with the state share that same concern. We are committed to, as an organization, we're very committed to transparency and sharing information. So we'll continue to share information as we get it.
Hey, Will. Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Dave Parker. I'm the Vice President of Engineering. I wanted to just point out one thing that maybe is clear, but I guess based on those last questions, I wanted to reiterate it. So the collapsed pipe that created the sinkhole, we've said that all the sewage was contained. There was no spill. There was no overflow. And in fact, the flow continued to be conveyed through this sewer pipe and onto DC Water's Blue Plains wastewater treatment plant. So it's not like it was just being held there and allowed to percolate down into the soil. It had a path to follow to be conveyed away. And as Bob O'Neill said, our hydrogeologist, we have very tight, largely impervious soils in this area. Bob described it as the type of soils you'd want to use on a landfill, for a landfill cap, that kind of thing. So those are impermeable soils that you're looking for those kind of applications. So in this case, we had these impermeable soils. We had a path for the flow to continue on. It essentially was conveyed and considered an open ditch that conveyed the flow on. We probably also still had the bottom half of the pipe. The top of the pipe collapsed, but the bottom part was there. So that flow was continuing to convey on through. When we raised the alert, it was when the flow passed over into this excavation area where the construction was happening, and that's what created this additional, I guess call it level of concern. But even then, there was a continuing flow path, so that the flow didn't accumulate higher and it created an overflow, and it had an escape path. So I don't think there's a way to provide a guarantee that nothing got into the groundwater. But I think what we have is a situation where the flows were managed and had a path to follow. And now with our understanding that Bob has given us about the impermeable soils and the way the water table works, I think we feel as comfortable as we can that we haven't had any kind of an impact. But I guess I don't know if there's really any way to prove that other than as we've offered, to continue taking the samples for the wells and make sure that the water stays clean. That's what we've been doing so far. We're getting those clean results, and I think that's the approach for the near term anyway, is to continue with the sampling and just make sure that nothing shows up. But we have no basis to think that there will be any problem at this point. Does that help or make sense?
It definitely helps. I keep, obviously we're thinking about it a lot since we have had a parade of visitors, and you can see your all night long. You guys, are troopers over there. But what happens if somebody tests positive for E. coli? I mean, what's the remediation?
I'm not the expert, but I guess what I think right now is, I guess hopefully it would be a short-term impact. This event is under, largely under control. Once the bypass pumping is fully operational, we're going to be able to, completely manage the wastewater and keep it contained. So I guess what I think right now is, just continue sampling and ideally it'll clear itself up just with the flow and the passage by continuing to operate the well. But I guess I'd ask others to weigh in on that.
Doesn't seem like once there's E. coli in the water table that it's able to be remediated. I would think it'd be treated before it went into the house. I just don't know how bad that situation is.
This is Dr. Parunjaberry with the Fairfax County Health Department. So one of the other types of advisories we would then put in place is a boil water advisory. E. coli, the reason we test and have learned from our experts a lot today is it's an indicator of the potential contaminants that can come into your well water. We know that boiling can kill just about any bacteria, viruses, parasites, and there's specific rules if you've ever been subject to a boil water advisory in other places. Again, these are private wells. County and state usually doesn't come in, and we don't order. We simply recommend what you can do. But in municipal water systems, when the pressure drops, when there's main breaks, we often go to that boil water advisory, and that would be one potential response. It may not be a remediation. Again, the remediation, I'll defer to our DC water, but that would be something that we would immediately put in place.
Thank you. It just seems like once it's in the water table, you don't know how to get rid of it, right? I mean, you don't condemn houses, but there must be some sort of treatment, right? Does anybody know?
Yeah, if I could jump in. Yeah, so Peggy, I know you mentioned before about contamination being down there for long periods of time. There's some types of contaminants that do have that property, particularly like stuff that's used to degrease things. They call them chlorinated solvents, and they're hard to get out. Things that are associated with that are suspended or dissolved in water actually can flush through a groundwater system fairly quickly, and that's primarily what's in here. And I don't want to speak for anybody else, but total coliform E. coli is something that's identified a lot in wells, throughout the country. And there's several ways to deal with that, both at the well, by chlorination. There's systems like you can use UV systems or in chlorination systems inside, and then you can do things to your well to get rid of it. Just for the same reason a septic system works, right? There's E. coli in a septic system, but the natural systems have a way of basically breaking that stuff down and getting to conditions where, as you move away from that septic system, the concern goes away. The bacteria concern is no longer a concern in the groundwater, as long as this treatment system or the septic system is operating properly. So those types of things can break down and flush out or degrade with time, but there are some contaminants that don't, like you mentioned.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm looking at we have some more questions also in the chat. How do we find out the results of our water being tested?
So
Bill, you want to speak?
I can answer that, or Zach,
Yeah.
or Will.
Yeah.
I think part of the decision that was made was that the information on individual wells was only going to be passed to those individual homes, not the public. So DC Water at the time sent back the individual results to the individual homes that were tested. If those individual homes wish to share outside of that, but DC Water didn't want to break that with the individual homes that were tested.
Thank you.
If your home has been tested and you do not have the results, please let Emmanuel know.
Yeah, this is Mary, and I do want to say I understand it was a holiday, but we were tested on Saturday, and we were told we would find out on Sunday night, and we didn't, and we called around a couple people, and I guess we finally found out on Monday. But if we're supposed to be told something, it'd be good to be told, when we expect it.
Agreed.
Agreed. All right. How does it how does this problem affect your ability to replace the pipe as you intended all along? So does this sinkhole at all looks like, does it throw off the work that we're doing, or does it delay our work, or?
Al, do you want to take that one?
Yes. Obviously, it is going to impact. It is slowing our work. We're obviously have stopped work on everything outside of this, focused on this particular portion of the site. So we do have to continue focusing on this system, this bypass system, stabilizing that area, and ultimately dewatering the excavated area. We have to confirm it's safe for our people to then start entering that excavated area. We would love nothing more than to get right back to work, but it is going to take some time to do that safely, and to be sure that we're not putting ourselves into a risky situation. Of note, that Maryland line is still active coming through this area, so we are proceeding cautiously to not make the situation worse. So it is going to, it is impacting us. We are looking at ways to ultimately overcome that and speed up the completion of this infrastructure. But as you can imagine, it's not helping us get done faster.
That said, one of the things we plan on doing as a team is once it's stable, that we're going to get back together as a team. None of us want to continue bypass pumping for 6 months. So we're going to collectively bring the team together to discuss other options to expedite the work, do other things that we can do to bring this online quicker, such that we're not reliant on it as output of the local temporary pumping station for the next 6 months.
All right. Let's see. What's our next question?
Test kits.
Yes. Can you provide us test kits so we can test our own water rather than wait for DC Water or Fairfax County?
Maureen.
Yeah, I have that one. We don't have test kits, and I do recommend you go through either DC Water, Fairfax County, because we have labs, and we use the incubation method to test for total coliform and E. coli, and it's much better than the over-the-counter test kits you'll get from Home Depot. Sometimes they'll have those quick ones, and they'll tell you you're positive for coliform, but labs, we add the reagent, and then it incubates at a specific temperature for 24 hours to grow, to give time for that bacteria to grow. So I highly recommend you use our labs, and we are going to schedule to whenever according to you. So you don't have to wait for us. The only wait is on the test itself, which is a 24-hour test. And Manuel, you got those scheduling, right?
Yeah, and definitely, we actually got I got an
Awesome.
email actually from a customer looking for
Great.
results from yesterday. So yes, we're going to get those out.
Hey, T, can you get us slide 8, please?
Yeah.
Couple more. Maybe I got the wrong one. It's the void loop. Bingo. You had it. You had it. You had it. There you go.
Okay.
So
So yeah,
the
I
next
know-
question
okay.
is there a danger of more sinkholes?
Yep.
Who's beating you to the punch, Emmanuel?
Um,
So from manhole 31, if you see the word drone, there's the manhole just above the E. To that point down to the far right, past that box, DC Water and Al's team slipped a 72-inch steel casing inside of the existing 78-inch, which was interesting that since we were constructing that box over top of the existing 78, everyone was worried about the quality of the pipe, and we did not want it to collapse in advance. So that's why that 78 was slipped in advance. From the left, from that E, that's what's failed. And we did not intend on using that anymore. So the only piece that is left of existing pipe is the small piece coming from the north at that picture, a little around 12 o'clock. Inside of their excavation, which is that circle there, it's quite great shape, correct, Al? But there's
Yes.
10 feet there. We don't know what condition it's in. So
Bob,
the
would it-
likelihood is small, I would say, but I'm never going to say no, right?
Bob, and that portion that cuts down the page, we did find was concrete encased as well. And so
Okay.
it's the pipe as well as a stabilizing blanket of concrete around it.
Good.
This process literally started 25 years ago. I don't mean to jump in here, but there are pictures of how badly that concrete has been destroyed, I guess, because of the confluence that's right here. And so I'm really worried that, one, that it's taken us 25 years to get this addressed. And I know that's the contractor's new, nobody's been on this 25 years besides the neighbors. But it is kind of frustrating that this is the whole thing we were trying to prevent for 25 years. And here we are. And appreciate you guys jumping on this, but I wouldn't assume the rest of that pipe or the rest of the pipeline is in good shape. I mean, I think you guys should know. You should figure it out so it doesn't happen to somebody else.
Yeah, this is Mary again. I'm right next to Peggy. Yeah, in fact, Richard and I made a trip down to Blue Plains in 1999, right after we had moved in here to talk about this. So yeah, 25 years.
Point taken. Is it the next question, if we want to move on to the next question, is prior to this vent, did you expect construction, two, reforestation to have been completed? What do you expect those dates to be now? So Will, who would you like to address this one?
Al should take that one.
Okay.
And then I would generalize that prior to this event, we anticipated about 6 months to complete this, which would include the backfill, the flow conversion, and then we would do reforestation. That would occur after flow was converted. So it was 6 months to reach a point where this new infrastructure was in service. The old infrastructure was out of service. And then we had a couple months beyond that for reforestation, site restoration, trail restoration. So that was our window prior to this event. As I noted, this is impacting our ability on that schedule, but the team has already started considering some resequencing that could help recover some of that time.
All right. Is it safe for animals and children? This is a
Wade,
natural.
Yeah, this is Wade Norris. That was my question. I'm the next door neighbor that Peggy referred to earlier. So I guess at this stage, you just can't tell what the overall impact of timing will be. I mean, I'm assuming you don't think it's going to push this out 6 months or a year, but it's likely that it will push it out, or it could quite well push it out 2 months or 3 months or 4 months. Is that the general ballpark?
Mr. Norris, I think that's the appropriate timing to consider. There's some instability issues that we need to be comfortable with, and getting back to work. There's some resequence that we've looked at as well, but that's order of magnitude. I think that's what I would anticipate at this point.
Okay. And I guess I have some other questions. I don't want to bog down the call because obviously my intention is to ultimately put the lot right next door on the market, and you can imagine what sort of impact this could have on the marketability of the lot. And there's no well on the lot now, so there's no way for me to test, the impact on lot 16A. But who should I sort of chat with about some of those more detailed questions? Who's the right contact person?
I mean, Emmanuel, any questions related to the DC water project, I think would funnel to you. If you're asking questions about the wells and all that, somebody from Fairfax would have to speak up on groundwater issues for future wells.
Mm-hmm. And who would be the right person if someone's on the call for the county?
Mr. Norris, this is Dr. Barry with Health Department. We can get back with you. I don't know if one of our environmental health folks want to assist at this point.
Yeah, that's fine. If someone can just, the folks at DC Water certainly have my contact info, or if someone, if you could channel something through just so I have a contact person to chat with, that would be very helpful.
Sure thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norris. The next question.
Just a moment. Sorry. Just to jump in. I'm going to have to jump off the call. I have a budget task force meeting, and everybody's showing up at my office at the moment. I just want to thank DC Water for putting this together. And I wanted to let all the residents know I'm going to drop the Drainsville email in the chat. Please reach out. We will continue monitoring the situation and working with the health department and working with DC Water. As I said, I'm sorry I got to jump off the call, but I will put, as I said, our email in the chat as well as the phone number of the office. And please reach out if you need additional help. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is it safe for animals and children? This is a natural paradise that we have enjoyed for decades. Did you mess it up?
I mean, I mean, we've expressed our opinion about the hydrogeologic information. I would pass this one again to somebody from Fairfax to speak up on beyond what the information that we've shared about the testing and the hydrogeology. At least for the first half of it.
Well, if I could speak to the actual site itself, we do maintain a fence around this location. So that is intended to protect any active wildlife as well as keep people, passersby, from entering this site. We do take that very seriously. There are risks physically on the site. So we have a fence around to protect anyone from the outside entering into this location. So I would ask that fence be respected from any that is an on-site safety mechanism to protect people in the area.
Yeah, the health department can only really comment on what's inside the house. So, we have removed the restrictions based again on the conversation shared earlier, the data that the hydrologist provided to us this afternoon. So in terms of the water being safe, it's again what we're seeing inside the home and through the well, and would defer again to our partners here on this call in DC Water and others to talk more about the environment. There may be other local and state agencies that can help assess that situation, but the health department can only speak to what's in the home.
Will I expect this question maybe towards the restoration of the site, Will?
Well, and obviously,
towards my dog walking down there and the children swimming in the river every day, it is an immediate concern. This is why we buy on this premises. So we would like perhaps a little bit of comfort. If you can grant it, if you can't, we would like a little bit of warning.
As a dog lover myself, I certainly appreciate that concern. We're committed to sharing all the information that we can.
I might add one of the other stakeholders who's been notified. I don't know if they're on the call. Is Department of Environmental Quality. So that's maybe another state agency. They can continue to partner with us and communicate when it comes to surface waters like rivers and things like that. Would that be appropriate, DC Water, that we connect some of these constituent concerns to our DEQ representative as well.
Yeah, Dr. Jabiri, one of the others is DC Water has got in contact with the ICPRB, the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin. So that is
So do you have a specific amount of time you would like dogs and children to avoid the river?
We can't, that's not a DC water thing. We can't speak to overland flow in Virginia. We would have to defer to county or state officials.
Thank you.
Okay, I see one more question in the chat. All of your sampling is downriver. Is there any plan to sample from properties on the in the other direction that are closer to the site than many of those you are sampling?
Maureen, do you want to take that, or do you want me to? I'm happy to.
I just, if you're concerned about sampling, please contact Manuel. We gave that number, and we can come out and sample at your house.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've got that ring. We thought we were getting all the homes that were around the site.
And I'm also placing,
initially.
Sorry, Maureen. I'm also placing my email address in the chat as well. You can feel free to email me, call me. I work days, nights, weekends, so literally. Okay, well that's the last question that we had in the chat. Are there any other questions that any residents have, or any Fairfax County representatives, or anyone?
This is Peggy. I sent you like a whole list of questions. You don't have to answer them here, but I'd like somebody to get back to me on those questions.
Emmanuel, you have those?
Oh yeah, the list of questions. Yes. So I did get those questions, and I did we have them. We'll get back to you with typed up responses, Peggy. But I do have that list.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Manuel, this is Ben. Can you, Emmanuel, could you share those responses with the group? I thought those 8 questions were great questions.
Oh, sure, that's fine. Yeah, what I'll do is when I get the responses, I can certainly share those, because I'm sure other folks will want responses, those as well.
No, they were great questions. The other thing, I think Peggy inquired about this, but I think you indicated that a recording of the call would be available. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how will you make that available?
We're gonna figure that out. Because of the size of it. Sometimes we put it on like an MP version and have it on like a shared drive and kind of give folks access to it. We'll figure it out.
Okay, but if you can share it in a way that it can be preserved, especially in my case, I may need to talk to prospective purchasers of the lot right next door about all this, and having this content could be helpful in that dialogue.
Yep, understood.
Okay, thank you. And you'll let the group know how that can be accessed. Assessed. Okay,
yep.
Accessed. Thank you.
You're welcome. I actually saw a hand raised a second ago, and I think it was
Mr. Wiles.
Mr. Wiles, yes.
It was me, thank you. But I think that you answered the question relating to sending out the kind of an email with those responses to everyone. And I don't know if you're able to put up an FAQ somewhere where maybe people can see all of these responses, but I'll leave it up to you to sort that out. Thank you.
Okay.
And this is Mary again. I just want to say that I know there's a lot of folks working all night. We can see the lights too. And it hasn't been great weather. And we just appreciate the people that have been down there trying to, to fix this and, in not ideal circumstances. So please convey our thanks to all those guys.
Yep, ours too.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll let the crew know.
Any other questions? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Definitely like to get a ballpark on how much do you think actually went into the water table? Because if it's minimal, it's just a different situation than something running since the 16th. Thanks.
Okay. Is that on your list of questions that you sent, Peggy, or?
I don't remember. I don't have it up, but it was one we asked tonight. You said you guys.
Yeah, it's question number 8.
Okay, that's on the list. Okay.
How much material? I think Peggy's thinking volume, probably.
Got it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right. So, any other questions, comments? As one of my colleagues says, emotional outbursts.
Oh, don't open that door, Manuel.
All right. Well, it looks like next steps. Well, for me, I'll get some information compiled that we can share with the community. So I've got those things jotted down. And again, we will continue with the sampling and we will continue with the coordination. And you have our contact information, such as mine right here. Any questions about the sampling or anything else related to the project? Tijuana, who some of you know very well, she's also on the project. She's the one that's been driving the slides tonight. So she's always in the loop here. She's my right arm when it comes to, well, I'm her right arm when it comes to this project. So you still have her information as well. You have my information. Any questions you have, you can filter those through us and we will get you responses.
Emmanuel, wait, Norris, let me correct what I just said. Peggy's question number 8 is slightly different from what I think she really wants an answer to, and that's how much volume actually got out and got into the water table. That's really a question 9, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Emmanuel.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, we can give you about 28 minutes back.
Okay.
Go have dinner.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and you'll be hearing from us with more information and updates. So stay tuned.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.